Welcome everyone to the second Study Abroad webinar by Project Access. I'm really happy to have a pretty big lineup of listeners join today. This will be the webinar will be run in English to make sure that also people who, for example, do IB or don't speak Finnish will be able to listen, and that it will be accessible to a wider array of people. But also feel free to write in Finnish in the chat if that feels more comfortable to you. Okay, now that we've done with some practicalities, let me introduce myself. I'm Juha. I'm the voice behind the emails with which I've been terrorizing you when it comes to these sort of these webinar info messages, etc., etc. Very brief introduction of myself. I am the head of Project Access team, the Finnish team, and I graduated from Cambridge with a history degree last year, and have a project of going back to Cambridge in October to do a master's degree. And we have a two-person panel today with us. There might have been some kind of summary mishaps that might have occurred to the third person who was supposed to join the panel, and we might be still missing her. But nevertheless, I'll let the panel introduce themselves. Fanny, Kia, please. Fanny, do you want to go first?
Yep, so my name is Fanny. I go to the University of Edinburgh. So I'm doing my bachelor's degree there. It's 4 years in Scotland, and I've done 3. So I've still got 1 more year to go. I study economics with environmental studies. And yeah, I've been in Helsinki for the spring due to the pandemic, but I'm planning to go back in September to enjoy my last year in Edinburgh. And yeah, what else? I'm from Tampere. I went to Tampere Lyceum Lukio, Rellu. So if anybody's from there, then shout out to you. And yeah, I did the IB program there as well. And I'm originally from Tampere. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Kia.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Kia. I'm studying in the US at Brown University. Just finished my 2nd year, so I've done half of my degrees because it's also 4 years there. Studying modern culture and media, so kind of like media studies and theory. And I also am studying a minor in entrepreneurship. I'm originally from Helsinki, but I've lived in France when I was younger. And I went to Helsingin Suomalainen Yhteiskoulu, and I didn't do the IB, I did the normal Finnish line. And what else? I fortunately got to be on campus this year because the US, we were able to get vaccines earlier and they were able to test all of us on campus, but our classes were still remote. And what else? Yeah, that's me.
All right, some of you might have paid attention that we're missing our European representative, Susan. She studied at Sciences Po. I think we might get her to join at some point, but let's just continue with this lineup. I would really encourage everyone to shoot their questions in the chat. You don't need to sort of wait for any kind of Q&A session. We'll be monitoring the chat, and you know, we can go off script in that sense. So please do ask. This is a great opportunity to ask our panelists whatever you wish. And yeah, I prepared a few questions to just kick off the discussion, but let's not allow that to constrain us, or really kind of have like you know, let's just discuss on whatever you, the listeners, will have in mind. So shoot the questions in the chat. The first question that I wanted to bring up, just to bring everyone to speed, because we probably have quite a bit of people with sort of various backgrounds when it comes to knowledge about either the British or the American application system. So just to bring everyone up to speed, Fanny and Kia, could you please very briefly describe the application process to your respective universities. Because this, our first webinar was about deciding where to study and what to study, and this is more about the application practicalities. So let's just check all the check boxes when it comes to essays and all that. So Fanny, do you want to just give a very quick recap, and quick Kia, please go then.
Yeah, sure. So I guess my application process is kind of the standard UCAS application process. I started off the entire application process in the summer before my last year of high school, so my UBI year. And I started off by just thinking about my personal statement and researching what the personal statement is about, what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to write about. And I spent the fall of my last year of high school just writing my personal statement. And then I also spoke to my teachers about my predicted grades since I was doing IB, and getting a reference letter from one of the teachers. And the deadline for my application was in January. So I sent in my application through UCAS to the 5 universities that I was applying to by January. I think it was like the middle of January or the beginning of January. Sent that in, and then I started getting my offers in the beginning of the year. And this was in 2018. So it was like the spring of my UBI year. And I think by the end of March that year, or around that time, I'd gotten all of my conditional offers or my rejections. So I got those, and then I ordered the universities that I wanted to, or I chose the 2 universities that I would want to go to if I made the offers. Chose my firm choice and my insurance choice. Then obviously did my IB finals in May, waited until July to get my results. And then I saw if I made the offers or if I didn't. And unfortunately I did. So that was my application process in a nutshell.
Yeah, and Kia, we actually have a small question in the chat whether you did the SAT test.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it's going to go pretty well with my answer. So I started kind of the whole process. I think it was like my second year of high school with the ACT test. So I didn't do the SAT test. I did the ACT, which is, you can do either one, SAT or ACT. They're a little bit different in format. For me, I like the ACT more. And I know for most universities in the States, you have to do it in addition to your tutkimus. But yeah, so I did that. I ended up doing it, I think 3 times, because the first 2 times didn't go as well as I wanted to. So then I studied up for it and did it this fall of my senior year. But I also started writing my personal statement during the fall of my senior year, in addition to getting 3 recommendation letters. So I had to get 2 from my teachers and 1 from my counselor. And then depending for Brown, I had to write also 3 short essays. So questions like, why Brown? What do you hope to contribute to the community? And I also had to send in my grades and kind of also put in what extracurricular activities I'd been doing during high school. So all of that happened throughout the fall of my senior year. And I applied early decision to Brown. So I had my deadline within October, and then I ended up getting an answer back in March. So all the schools I got and all the responses I got around March. I see there's a question for me. Yeah, so I used a common application. So that's what you use for all schools in the US. And it's similar to UCAS in the way that you put your personal statements, grade, extracurriculars, and recommendation letters. Those go to all the universities that you apply in the States, but each university will have like their own requirements, like their short essays that I had to do. And yeah, and I also sent in my SAT and ACT scores, and also I had done some of my UO exams already in the fall. So I also sent those to the university, or I just said what grade I got. But yeah.
Kia, I'm going to go a bit off script and ask a question related to a thing that you mentioned. You said that you sat the ACT 3 times. I think because if you're a Finnish student who might not have that much experience sitting American standardized tests. It might take some time to kind of get into the groove and a few resets. Did the resets have any implications for your application process, and how did you did you just get to pick your score?
So each university kind of has different policies. So for Brown, they had this thing called the super score. So because the ACT is divided into 4 sections: science, reading, writing, and math. And from each section, you get a score. And so for Brown, I was able to send all 3 of my, the times that I did the test, and they would pick the best scores from each section. So I kind of got a super score. So in that way, it was beneficial for me. But I think for some universities who don't have this super scoring option, I would send just the best score that I got, because then they might look at it in the way that, oh, okay, you did this many times, and maybe you didn't do as well as throughout the whole thing. You didn't raise your score as much as we would hope to see. But for Brown, it was different, because they would pick the best scores from each sections of the times you did the test.
All right, so the key takeaway is that there's quite a bit of differences between various universities of how they treat those tests and how they treat the resets.
And you can see all those policies when you go on the admissions website of the university and then kind of look at their testing requirements. And then they'll explain if they super score or if they just look at that one score you get. And I also had to do the TOEFL, which is the English language exam. Forgot to mention that.
Thanks a million, Kia. If we move to the next question, sort of writing a personal statement or a kind of an admissions essay, whether it's a general or a college-specific essay, is a pretty daunting task, and many high schoolers might not have sort of experience of really advertising themselves in essay format. Fanny, Kia, can you both go through your experience of kind of starting from 0 words to actually having something worth sending in? Fanny, do you want to go first?
Yes, of course. So I spent quite a long time on my personal statement, but I remember starting off by just reading everything I could about it online. And I think I found one book about it as well, or one university applications book in our local library in Tampere. So I read that as well. But yeah, I spent a long time researching what the personal statement is, what it's supposed to include, what is the balance between your extracurricular activities and then your academic achievements and who you are as a person and all of that. So yeah, I spent quite a while on that. And then once I felt like I knew enough about what the personal statement is, I wanted to start writing. But before I started writing, I kind of took a paper and pen, and then I wrote down in different categories. I try to think about my experiences, and I divided my experiences into different categories. So I thought about, okay, what are my hobbies? What are my extracurriculars that I might want to communicate to the university about? What are my academic achievements? And then what are some things that I've done that are related to the subject that I want to pursue, so economics or environmental studies. So I kind of tried to just think about the experiences that I'd had so far and divide them into different sections, and then choose the ones that I wanted to include in my personal statement that I thought that were relevant. So I did that, and then I started writing. I started writing quite quickly, I think. So my first draft was not great, but it was good that I had something written down on paper, because I think the most crucial part is the editing part. So once you've got some sort of a draft down, I then started editing, and I had over 10 drafts at least of my personal statement. And then when I felt like it was readable and it was okay, I sent it off to a bunch of my friends and my guidance counselor and people that I felt like could contribute and read it. So I had quite many extra pairs of eyes look at it. And yeah, I kept editing it throughout the fall, and then eventually got to a point where I was like, I can't make it any better. So that was my experience.
Funny, if I may, before I let Kia go, if I may sort of dive slightly deeper into kind of the various topics you discussed in your personal statement. You talked about extracurriculars, academic achievements, et cetera, et cetera. Sort of what is really what do you think is the value the personal statement adds over and above, listing all of those in a CV format or just just like listing your grades, for example, because that's also a list of your academic achievements. So can you talk a little bit more about that, if that made sense?
Yeah, of course. So I think one misconception that some people have is that your personal statement is supposed to be about, all of the great academic things that you've done and kind of listing that, but it's really about just showing that you're kind of a well-rounded person and that you're trying to write about who you are and what your personality and what you're passionate about, and trying to let that shine through and kind of communicate that through the piece of text. So I think it's really important to pay attention to the personal statement being about you and who you are, and structuring it so that it's not just about your academic achievements, but it's also about your hobbies and what you're passionate about, and maybe talking about an experience that you've had that affected your decision to apply abroad. So it's really it's a lot more than just listing your experiences. It's more about just communicating who you are, I think.
All right. But let's come back to that after I let Kia tell about her experiences. There's a lot of things to discuss on that. Please go on.
For sure. I guess to just preface it in a way, the US personal statement is somewhat different from the UK personal statement in the way that our personal statement asks you to talk about your identity and who you are as a person, because everywhere else in your application, they can kind of see your achievements, your grades, your extracurriculars. So the personal statement is more about kind of showing your personality and what things you value. So how I started writing my personal statement was the summer before senior year. I read a lot of personal statements online that had been kind of accepted to top universities, and I was kind of looking at how people wrote it, how people communicated, like who they were as a person. And I also read about, what not to write about and what is good topics to write about. So kind of avoiding all types of cliches, such as, one of the biggest cliches is, I did sports and then I hurt myself and then I became a better person, because a lot of admissions officers read about that. So after I did that, I started writing down things that I valued and what I could write about. And I had 2-3 different themes that I was writing about. And then I ended up choosing one topic that I ended up writing about. And so I wrote my first draft, and then I had my best friend look over it, and he was just like, "Oh, this is so bad." And I was like, "Okay, let me go back to the drawing board." Kind of restructured my essay, and then I worked on it probably also throughout the whole fall, 2-3 months. And at one point, 2 weeks before the deadline, I had just a few people look at it, because I didn't want too many mixed opinions on my essay. So I had my parents and my closest friend and my counselor look at it. And I ended up re-editing it so many times that I couldn't even read through my personal statement at that point anymore, because I had gone over it so many times. So then it was good to have another pair of eyes to be like, okay, this is good. But I really put emphasis into kind of bringing my own Finnish experiences in it, and things that I have experiences that are unique, so that I would kind of stand out in the pool of applicants. And I avoided all types of cliches. And I think at the end, my kind of personal statement ended up being kind of my life story, but then how that inspires me to do social impact work or whatever I was doing in high school. So kind of tying my experiences to the things that I was doing, instead of just listing all the things that I was doing. So kind of showing why I was doing the things that I was doing.
So in a sense, to summarize, having some sort of a coherent narrative that would tie everything together. All right. there's a lot of juicy points that I want to come back to, but I think I should let Susan jump in. So Susan is our third panelist representing continental Europe and Sciences Po. And I think, Susan, I severely miscommunicated the time when this was supposed to start. So this is completely my fault. But to bring you up to speed, we're discussing writing your application. So do you have comments on that?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Susan. I'm a colleague of yours, actually. I suppose I have the experience from writing personal statements from two different kind of processes, because my bachelor's was in Scotland, so I did the UCAS one. And then for my second one, for my master's, I did my dual master's with Sciences Po and LSE, so I wrote a different one for that. And I suppose the second time around, I was also a lot better in the process of writing personal statements. Would you like me to kind of elaborate the process that I went through writing it, or?
Yeah, we're talking about a kind of a storyline of, going from 0 words to actually having something worth sending in.
Yes. I suppose because first time, well, I didn't have the desired effect through my personal statement in my first application process, although there were other things as well, obviously. But the second time around, I really put a lot of effort into writing my personal statement. So I started really, really early on, because I believe I put in my application in January 2017 maybe, and then I had started writing it early in the fall. So I kind of did really extensive research on, first of all, what are good personal statements, because I don't think I did that the first time around. So for example, just small things like how you should not start your personal statement. So I was like, a lot of people like to use quotes and stuff, or ever since I was a young girl, boy, person, whatever, I have, and these were like, don't use these. They see these all the time. Like, don't do this. So then I kind of really try to approach to that as well. So mine, I started with a personal story that really tied to why I was interested in the topics that I was going to study. And secondly, things that I really researched were the universities I was applying to. So for me, for example, the program that I was applying to with Sciences Po and LSE, I really looked into kind of what was written, especially on the Sciences Po website. And they were really emphasizing kind of how the program combines theory and practice. So then I actually framed my whole personal statement through kind of how I am myself, a combination of theory and practice. So I saw in a lot of forums also how Sciences Po really wants people to kind of really convey the point that Sciences Po is the next natural step for them to take. So that was kind of the main aim of my personal statement. So I wanted to make it, personal and start from a personal story that really ties to why I'm interested in this degree, but then also really, really make it really obvious that my whole personality is suitable to this specific degree. And then obviously kind of other points that I found in my research were that, okay, Sciences Po really likes internationality, they really like work experience, they really like good grades, and they like international experience. So those 4 things. And then because I have 3 out of them, I didn't really have work experience as much. I was really playing into the 3 that I had, and then emphasized how Sciences Po could give me the 4th one. So I suppose it was a result of intense research and kind of playing into my strengths, but also kind of pointing out how Sciences Po could help me build on my weaknesses.
Thanks a million, Susan. And just to sort of add to that, a great resource to use is really the university website specifying what is actually being taught at those universities and what is being researched. So for example, when I was first applying, I wasn't really aware of that. And I sort of, because I applied twice, and the first one was a kind of a failed attempt. And I wasn't really aware of the fact that I should be paying attention to sort of the specific type of, as you know, as applying for history, what kind of history is being taught and researched. So I wrote the personal statement very much from the point of view of generic interest towards the subject, even though that is also useful. But in a sense, in order to argue that you're a good fit for a particular course or university, it might make sense to actually look at what is being taught there and kind of trying to tie your personal statement to that. So for example, I'm just going to link a random course. So I picked up law at Cambridge. So actually it's quite easy to just go to a website, see what is being taught, and see, does this actually interest me, and how could I write my personal statement, or at least a part of it, around it. And I think Kia, would you agree that this could apply to American universities as well, or do you think that, or does the liberal arts character of American universities kind of change that? And also, can you please define liberal arts in a sentence?
Yeah, okay, so I'll start with the liberal arts part. Liberal arts in the US is basically when you're doing your undergraduate degree, you have your major, so the main thing you study, but they also have, the school has a lot of emphasis for you to take classes in a broad range of areas. So in a liberal arts college, you'll study your, like, let's say I study modern culture and media, I study that, but in addition to that, I have a bunch of electives in a range of things from psychology to sociology. So like I know in Europe, you're very focused on the one thing you study, whereas in the US, you study a lot of things. And regarding the other questions about research in universities, that is very, very important for the short answer questions. So because in those, you really want to show that you've done your research on the school. So for example, for Brown, when I was doing my research, I knew Brown was really into social impact, collaboration, and just being kind of active at the school and doing a lot of community-based things. And I also kind of looked into the quirks of Brown, like the traditions and so on. So when I was writing my essays, I was kind of, my short essays, I was kind of trying to tie in my experiences with Brown and showing how I would fit in that community. And Brown does a really good job at choosing just that type of people, because at Brown, everyone's really, really collaborative and like nice, for example. But if you look at, for example, the University of Pennsylvania, everyone there is very, very competitive and hardworking, and maybe won't collaborate as much. And like the admissions kind of chooses those types of people based on the essays. But yeah.
All right. Thanks a million, Kia. Krish, thanks a lot for your finance-related question. Let's tackle that after a couple of questions, kind of elaborative questions still on this theme that I have for Fanny and Kia. Fanny, you mentioned the various topic areas that you covered in your personal statement. As I said, academic achievements, extracurriculars, etc. But how do you communicate academic achievement or academic interest? How did you communicate your interest in economics? So, for example, when I'm asked why I'm interested in history, I sometimes struggle to answer that question because it's actually not easy to argue that convincingly. It's just, well, duh, it's interesting, period. So how did you go about that?
Yeah, so in my personal statement, I actually spoke about I remember I started off writing about the Volkswagen emissions scandal, which is kind of about economics and business, but then also about like sustainable development and environmental issues. So I actually wrote about that and how, when I first heard about the scandal, what my thoughts were and how that inspired me to study kind of a combination of environmental studies and then economics / business. So I wrote about that. And then I also, I think I wrote about like what thoughts it raised in me and what my thoughts on it were and why it inspired me to study this particular subject. But then in addition to that, I think I wrote about some podcasts on like development economics that I'd listened to, because I knew that a lot of people would write about books that they had read. So I wanted to be a little bit different. So I wrote about podcasts that I'd listened to and why I like listening to them. Then in terms of the academic side of things, I think I wrote about what my particular interests were in economics, since I was taking economics and biology, which is kind of related to environmental studies on the IB. I wrote about those subjects, and I think when I was writing about those two subjects, I chose like one area of that subject that I was particularly interested in, and then wrote a sentence or two about why. So I think those were kind of the three main academic things that I wrote about in the PS.
Thanks to Melina Fanny. That was a very, very insightful answer. And Kia, one thing that I wanted to sort of push further about was you mentioned that you wrote a kind of a coherent narrative about your experiences and why those would be very good for Brown, and that you kind of had some sort of Finnish lens to that. How did that Finnishness play into it, and how can being Finnish distinguish an applicant in a pool of thousands of others?
So I mean, the first thing, how you distinguish yourself, how in the US they choose people, is they have admissions officers for different geographical areas. So they probably have like an admissions officer for like the Nordics or just Europe, maybe. I don't think they have even one for the Nordics, but there's not that many people from Finland that apply. So kind of showing that off is like, oh, okay, we haven't had any Finnish people in like 2 or 3 years. And obviously we want to be able to say, oh, we have people coming from 60 different countries. And this person might bring their culture here, which would add to the value, like campus culture, community value at the school. But I guess I can kind of speak how the Finnishness came out in my essay. So I was writing about a moment where I kind of came to terms, or like was happy to be a Finnish person, because like I said, I've lived in France and the States before. And so when I moved to Finland, I didn't feel maybe as Finnish as other people around me, because I had kind of lived in those different cultures. So I ended up talking about like a moment where I was proud to be Finnish. And like after that realization, I wanted to add to the Finnish community. And so I was talking about how like the values of Finland that I like humbleness and peace and all that. And then I tied it to, so I was doing my extracurriculars included like peace work and like social impact, where I was like helping like young people through this TV series thing that I was producing. So I kind of tied it back to that I was proud to help Finland, but also represent Finland, because I was also talking through my school. We went to the UN, so I like did a speech there, and I was like, oh, there I was really proud to be Finnish, because I had like come to terms with being Finnish. So there's a bit of a rambling answer, but yeah.
No, that made a ton of sense. Thank you very much, Kia. I think we should move on to Krish's questions about finance. I think maybe the best way to tackle it would be to talk about perhaps the various scholarship opportunities that would exist in sort of funding, in the British, American, and the French universities in which the panelists studied, and how did you sort of navigate that? So, Fanny, would you want to start, or how did you go about it? Scotland was free until the Brexit calamity, at least.
Yeah, so I don't know how much I'll have to contribute to this question, since I did start university in 2018, when if you were part of the EU, you got your tuition for free. Or my tuition costs, being an EU student, it costs £1,800 a year, but that's also covered by SAS, the Scottish, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's kind of like a Scottish Gala in a sense. So they cover that. So my tuition is free, and it is, even though the situation's changed, it's free for me until I finish my degree in Scotland. So I'm really, really lucky in that sense. I think in terms of the scholarship opportunities, since I didn't really have to think about those, I think Juha can maybe talk a little bit more about those, since you studied in England, and it was maybe a little bit more relevant there before Brexit as well. But I can maybe answer the rest of the question from Krish about the housing expenses and other expenses in university. So in my first year of uni, I lived in student housing or student accommodation, and I think it cost about 600 euros per month. But I did get my opintotuki and the accommodation extra on top of that. So I got 460 euros from Kela each month, and then you can also get your student loan from Kela, which it helps a lot. Also, I knew that I wanted to study abroad when I was in high school, so I worked every summer and tried to save a little bit of money so that I could enjoy myself while I was in Edinburgh. So yeah, I don't know, do you want to fill in or?
Well, yeah, I can fill in by saying that also the Finnish student loan is the best loan globally. So so you will get 40% of that reimbursed if you graduate on time, and then also if you study abroad, you're bound to graduate on time because you'll have to graduate in 3 or 4 years, or the allotted time frame. Kia, do you want to add a little bit on sort of how financial aid works at Brown, or maybe the States at large?
Yeah, sure. I can also add that for those who want to study in the States, I also got the Fulbright scholarship, which is around $10,000. And then every year you can reapply and they give you like some extra money. So that's one way I funded it, plus the Kela loans, plus the opintotuki. And then, yeah, in the States, I got some money. Different colleges give. So Brown, unfortunately, is one of those schools that if you're an international student and you're applying for financial aid, they might reject you based on that. But thankfully, that didn't happen to me. But that's a thing that you need to take into consideration. Cornell is very notorious for doing that, for example. But for example, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, and Amherst College, they won't look if you need money, and then they will usually pay your full tuition if you get in. So I had a friend who just got into Yale, and he doesn't have to pay. He has to pay barely anything for like both living and tuition wise, because he just got really fortunate in the way that they paid everything for him. But for me, it's been kind of a mix of the money I got from Brown, the Fulbright, and the loans. And also, for example, the next 2 years I'm living off campus, which cuts my cost. So for the first 2 years at Brown, you live on campus in a dorm. But my friends and I are moving off campus, and that's splitting my costs into two, by half, pretty much. So now I think the first few years were a little bit financially a little bit difficult, but now it's looking better.
Yeah, and Kia mentioned a very important concept that is of interest to those applying to the States, which are need-blind admissions. So meaning that the universities will not look at whether you need money when evaluating your application. And so sort of I listed the five big need-blind universities in the chat. Susan, do you want to comment when it comes to finance and Sciences Po? How did that work, and what kind of scholarship arrangements there might be?
Yeah, so for Sciences Po, the good thing was that if you're an EU student, they actually calculate your tuition based on your household income. So I got a really low tuition because of that to begin with. And then I suppose I'm just going to comment on the LSE side of things as well, since it was part of my master's degree. For there, I could apply for like graduate student support, and I got around £11,000 to like cut off of my tuition. Otherwise, had to take a British student loan, use the Finnish student loans, and obviously like opintotuki and so on. And then I also got some grants. For example, I applied for one from my old university in Scotland, got a small grant from there. There are some grants in Finland as well. So I, for example, got a couple of times, I got one from Tellerva and Juuso Valdeni Säätiö, which is for like low income students. So if you're low income, I really encourage to look into that. That was a big help. So I suppose, I think Sciences Po has a good system in terms of like already having the tuition fee system to be like according to your household income. So I really like that. That was a huge help. But then also they do have some scholarships, for example, the KROUS, which is like CROUS, but I missed the deadline for that, so I couldn't apply for that. But luckily I was able to get some other assistance. There are also a lot of people in Sciences Po who work, for example, as nannies and so on during term time, because it's quite normal in Paris. So there are like other sources of income as well. But I chose to kind of focus on my studies because it is quite intense in Sciences Po.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I just dug up the website of the Valdeni Säätiö because I think that's one of, if I'm not mistaken, that's one of the more significant sources of grants in Finland.
Yeah.
So that's also, Yeah, definitely kind of a thing to pay attention to. Well, if we move on to the next topic, which I think could be the preparation for your application while in high school. As an aside, Project Access definitely does not want to contribute to the image that you need to prepare for years and years and years before you apply. That is definitely not a good phenomenon that we want to encourage in a sense of kind of stoking these academic arms races when it comes to thinking about applying to university even before you've properly started high school. But maybe if you're kind of, let's say you're in your first year, what are kind of these more laid back, not so serious, not so kind of grueling ways in which you could already start moving towards your the aim of studying abroad in a sense. So Funny, how was it for you? Did you just apply abroad out of nowhere? But did you kind of do anything interesting or useful during, let's say, the last 2 years of your high school career that kind of supported you on that journey in the end?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. Would you want me to answer in terms of like the subjects and academic stuff that I did, or like in general, everything in extracurriculars? And
yes, a great follow-up. Because my question was very wide. So academics and other things as well, but of course you can focus within that.
Yeah. I think when I started high school, I did have an idea that I wanted to study abroad. I've also lived in the US, so I knew that I wanted to study somewhere abroad later on in my life. But in my first year, well, obviously I had to take the pre-IB year and then 2 years of the IB program. But in my first year, I didn't really think about the subjects that I was taking. Obviously, I had a lot of compulsory subjects that I had to take. And then when it came time to choose my IB subjects, I didn't really pay too much attention to those either. I guess if I had wanted to study like natural sciences in university, then it would have been smarter for me to pick maybe chemistry or physics or something. I only did biology as a natural science. But I chose the subjects that I was interested in at that point. And then in the 2 years that when I was doing the IB, I tried to kind of delve deeper into the subjects and try to find out. I liked economics from the start, but I tried to like figure out what field of economics I was more interested in and kind of try and find areas of interest in each of those subjects. Maybe one thing that I would say is I know that everyone has to take like math and English, and I didn't enjoy those too much in high school, but it was really important to do those since they all came back to me at university. I had to take mandatory courses in both. So it's definitely worth like putting effort into those subjects as well in high school. Then in terms of like extracurricular stuff, I did some things in the first year of high school. I was part of like an Erasmus program in my high school, which helped a lot. I wrote about it in my personal statement. And then I had played the piano for a while, so I wrote about that as like my hobby. But I think if you're at a point where you're going into your last year of high school and you feel like you haven't really done anything that you could write about, there's so many opportunities. Like I had that moment of panic before my last year of high school. I was like, I haven't done any sort of volunteering. And then I just spoke to my guidance counselor and I was like, look, I want to do something that I could write about and something that doesn't require too much time. And then I ended up volunteering at Red Cross for like their Nälkäpäivä Keräys campaign. And there's definitely opportunities that you can take, but also I want to say that if you feel like you haven't done anything, that feeling's probably not true, because I feel like everyone's done something. Everyone has some sort of a passion and some sort of a hobby that you can for sure write about in your applications. You just have to think about it, and I'm sure you'll find something.
Thanks a million, Fanny. Kia, would you like to continue?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start with the academic part. For me, I knew I was going to probably study humanities or social sciences. So I honestly just took classes that I really liked. So psychology, social sciences, econ, history. But I think one thing that I did make kind of an informed decision was that I knew the schools in the States liked you to kind of take the most challenging classes at your school. And when you're doing the Finnish national curriculum, you don't really, the only thing that you can choose, I guess, is advanced math, eli pitkä matikka. So I did that, even though I'm not the biggest fan of math, but I was like, okay, this is the one thing I'm gonna like do just to look competitive, I guess. Um, in regards to preparation, I think, and I always knew that I was going to study abroad because having lived abroad and having seen my parents study abroad, that was kind of a natural thing for me. But it was during my second year of high school that I really started thinking about kind of extracurriculars and things like that. So I ended up doing student council and starting a club at my high school. And then at the end of my second year and beginning of my abiwas, I actually did the majority of my like extracurriculars then. So right before the application deadline happened. So I was part of this peace group and I was doing the TV production thing at that time. But yeah, so like a lot of my extracurriculars ended up happening kind of at the end part of my high school. So it doesn't have to start like lukion ykkönen, like first year of high school, but it does help to kind of think about what extracurriculars you would like to do. And as long as there are things that you like doing and not things that you're doing just to look competitive on the application, and it's better to do a few things really well instead of doing a lot of different things and maybe not being that good at them or not being that spectacular like impact wise, because I know a lot of students might be like, okay, I'm going to do sports, music, this club and this club. At least in the US, people might do like 5-6 different clubs, which you can't really do in Finland because there's no clubs. But then universities will look at that and they're like, okay, you're spreading yourself too thin. Like, what do you actually care about? So I was doing things I cared about, and I wasn't pushing myself to do things just to do them, I guess.
That is an extremely important point. Susan, how was it like for you? I think for you it was a bit different because you applied to Sciences Po for your master's. But if we kind of do a thought exercise of how would a high schooler who would be applying to Sciences Po for a bachelor's degree would prepare, or what would be useful for them, what do you think?
Well, I think I can comment again, like based on kind of both bachelor's and master's. First of all, I think this is a really good project that you have because it does actually like really give access to the information that you need to do these things and so on. Because for my bachelor's, I always knew I wanted to study abroad, but my parents haven't even gone to university or anything. So I really didn't have this kind of resource of being like what I need to do and stuff. So I didn't really necessarily do those things. And the things that I didn't know how to highlight them in my personal statement. Whereas the second time around, when I went for my study, like, or applied for my master's, I knew how to do those things. So I suppose for Sciences Po, like one of the 4 things that they do look for is like extracurriculars. So I did put really a lot of effort into those in my final 2 years of university in Scotland. So I suppose it's a similar process for the bachelor's, I would say, even, you know, if it's just slightly earlier. I would like to echo like Kia and Fanny in the fact that you should do things that you genuinely enjoy and not just try and collect things for the sake of collecting them. I think a big extracurricular thing for me that probably set me apart is football, which I played since I was 9, and then I was like the president of my football club in Aberdeen, and so on and so forth. And I was also involved with the student association and was the like head of societies at my university in my final year and so on. So I did do quite a few extracurricular things. So I do think that has a big impact on the application. So it is somewhat similar, I would assume, in high school, albeit I would hope that it's less less pressure and kind of less activities in high school than it was for me in my final years in bachelor's. Yeah, do you have any follow-up questions, Johan?
No, I think that definitely makes sense. But do you think that, or I actually do have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
But do you think that does Sciences Po pay attention to extracurriculars when
Yes.
applying? Okay. So
I would say so that's like one of the 4. I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I would say internationality is one that they like. extracurriculars, then work experience, and academic grades. And as I said, I had 3 out of 4. I didn't have work experience really because I had to work during the summer, so I couldn't do internships and so on. But I had many extracurriculars. I had a lot of international experience, and I had really good grades. So I feel like obviously, like when you're applying for masters, you might have more work experience anyway. So maybe they won't put as high an emphasis on that, like for your bachelor's application. But I do assume that the same kind of things they will be looking for in bachelor's as well.
All right. And I suppose that they're sort of manageable extracurriculars, not sort of saving unicorns from going extinct.
No, I assume not. And I suppose, as you mentioned, obviously for the bachelors, they have different kind of campuses. So they have regional campuses. So you have the kind of North American campus, you have the African campus, you have like the Asian campus, Latin American campus, and so on and so forth. So I would assume that, it would be beneficial to kind of mirror your interest according to a specific region. And then if you can really showcase that through extracurriculars as well, then it should be helpful for your application. Obviously for masters, it was much more general because it's just the Paris campus.
Thanks a million, Susan. And I'm just going to reply to a question by Yvonne when it comes to dual nationality. I don't think dual nationality is really an issue in any formal sense. It might be a sort of an issue both positively or negatively. It's just there. Of course, if there's a kind of for example, if you're applying for the States, Kia might want to corroborate, but for example, if being from 2 countries in one way or another, or having connection to 2 countries has shaped you in an important way, that might provide you with a lot of interesting stuff to write in your essay. Yeah,
I guess I can add to that. I don't think, at least in the US, I don't think that's an issue at all. Actually, I guess the biggest pro it is you can write about it, and then if you're also American, you can get financial aid more easier. But for example, in my friend group, so I'm living with 7 other people next year in a house, and I am the only one with only 1 nationality. Everyone else has 2 or 3. So I think it's just a plus, honestly, because then you have more kind of a more worldly approach in the eyes of the university. But yeah.
Thanks, Kia. And I think we have enough time for our final topic, which is mental health. And we've actually gotten a few good mental health questions related to sort of juggling one's studies. The initial question that I prepared was more related to mental health during kind of preparation to the application, but let's collapse these 2 together. How would I formulate this into a question? Well, what have been your strategies of taking care of your mental health long-term when you were applying, but also when you were studying? I think that might be a kind of a question. It's quite wide, but please kind of choose your own perspective. Fanny, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'd maybe highlight 2 main things that I did. The first one that I did when I was doing my application, but also that I still do when I'm studying or working or whatever. I try to have like at least one like non-stressful project that I'm working on. So it could be like knitting and some form of art, or I don't know, trying to become a better runner or reading a certain book series or something. But I try to have one project like that, like ongoing. So when I'm working on something and then I reach a point where I'm like, oh, I can't focus anymore. It's getting too stressful. I want to take like 30 minutes off doing something else. I have that non-stressful project that I can go to, and that immediately takes my mind elsewhere. Because I feel like if I didn't have that, then I'd just spend the 30-minute break just wondering what I should do, and I feel like I'd keep on just thinking about the work that I was doing and couldn't fully relax. So yeah, that's one kind of mental health tip that I guess I have. Another one that's more related to the application process is you should try and speak to someone about it, and kind of tell somebody, at least one person, about the process that you're going through, so somebody knows that you're going through this application process. so that you always have one person that you can turn to and speak to when you're getting too stressed or when, I don't know, you want to get your thoughts somewhere else. So yeah, have one non-stressful project that you're working on, and then have at least one person that you can speak to and that knows that, or the person knows what you're going through. So yeah, those are my two tips, I guess.
Thanks a million, Fanny. Kia, do you have anything to comment on this?
Yeah, for sure. Kind of to echo what Anni said, I was fortunate enough to have kind of two friends that were applying to the US as well. And one of them was from France and one of them was from Finland, but he was doing kind of this international IB boarding school. So he had more resources at the school to navigate the application process. So he would like kind of tell me what he was learning at school and like strategies to think about when you're applying to schools. So that having kind of a support system helped. And I think one thing that's very, very important is to not try to do everything at the last minute. So for me, I had during my senior fall, I had two like big extracurricular projects that I was doing. My YO-kokeet, my application, and just like school. And that was too much for me. I actually did end up having like a little bit of a burnout in December. So I would think like, for example, like you don't have to push everything to be done at once. Maybe do them a little bit before like the time you're going to have like exams and the application at the same time, because that's going to help with like thinking more clearly and having more free time. And I think the third one is like see your friends, like go to events, go to parties, because like don't cancel those things just because you have to like finish an application by a time. Because for example, I didn't end up going to my abiresteli because I hadn't finished my application. So like things like that, like maybe like just time management in general, and you'll feel like much better throughout the whole process.
Thanks, Gia. That's a great point. Don't skip parties, especially now that there's not that many of them. Susan, would you want to close off the discussion?
Yes, I have a lot to say on mental health. I suppose for me, first thing that kind of kept me sane was football, because I think doing sports has been a good outlet for me throughout my whole life. So if you have a thing like that, try and keep it in your life. Secondly, I would echo Kia, like don't try and do everything. I think I still had too much on my plate, like to be quite candid, like I did have also kind of a burnout during my like final year of my bachelor's when I was applying. And I don't really want anyone else to go through that. But if I had tried to do even more, then I think it would have been even worse kind of thing. So I made the decision like knowingly not to work during my studies, because I was like, okay, I will get good grades and I will get grants through my good grades, and I will like that will help me fund my way. And then I'll focus on the extracurriculars more than the work. So I kind of made that conscious decision not to try and do all those three things. And I think I would say like afterwards, like kind of looking back now, I would say that it's easy to say like don't stress too much, but it's really not the end of the world. Try and keep that in mind when you're kind of going through your application process and going through your studies. Like it's not the end of the world really, like if you don't get in, or if you don't get in at the first time. I mean, you also said that he didn't get in the first time and so on. I didn't get into my dream bachelor school. And then I worked really hard and I got into my dream master's, and I was like, I need to get into this master's because I didn't get into the bachelor's that I wanted to get into. But when I got to my master's, I was like, yeah, this is cool, but it actually didn't like magically make me happy or magically fix my life. And I was like, it was really interesting and cool to be there, but honestly, like it didn't bring me that magical happy state. And obviously I'm happy that I did the degrees that I did, but like in the end, like you can get to the place where you want through many different routes. So you really shouldn't, like, while you're working really hard and like, working towards the goal of like getting where you want to go, just like keep in mind that even if you don't get there, you'll get to like a good place in one way or another. So I think that's just something that it's easier said than internalized, but something they should definitely keep in mind, like when you're doing the application process, so that you don't just devote your whole life to being stressed and working hard and not forgetting the fun stuff.
Yeah, thanks a million, Susan. And I think this is a great way for us to cap off the discussion by saying that, well, it's a bit ironic. We've been talking about this for an hour and then saying that actually all of this, while still being somewhat important isn't actually that important. Well, Fanny, Kia, Susan, thanks a million. I'll let the panel go. I will stay for some time to answer questions. So thanks a million for attending the webinar. Have a great day, great rest of the Sunday. All right, bye out.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay and answer some of the questions in the chat also that didn't get answers.
Oh yeah, I can actually do that as well.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Just because I didn't want to pressure you to stay, so I wanted to let you go as well. So I'm happy that you can stay a bit. And well, this is a great opportunity to for people who are still in the call to ask questions. But also to the panelists, feel free to drop off at any time if you feel like continuing with your day. So we had. I think there was a question about convincing one's family about the decision, which actually might make sense. Like that's actually a big question. If you're facing a situation in which your family's a bit skeptical, I suppose. What does anyone in the panel have experience of that, or experience of kind of of justifying one's decision to not maybe a family member, but to someone else? I might have some comments on this, but before that, does the panel have anything to comment on it?
I think other people might have better things to comment, because for me, my parents had studied abroad, so they kind of understood where it was coming from.
Yeah, for me, like as I said, like my parents don't really have even university experience, but funnily enough, I feel like in my family, I was just, because I knew since I was about 9 that I wanted to go abroad, so it was kind of clear. I was always like, I'm going to go abroad, and they kind of didn't really have a say in it. I didn't really feel like, my mom has always been really sad to like see me go, and she's like missed me so much and so on. And she did like live abroad a bit when she was younger, and then she's always saying now like, oh, I only now understand like how hard it must have been for my mom for like to see me leave and go to like live in Germany for a couple of years. And she's like, it's so much easier to like leave than to be the one left behind, kind of thing. But they did understand that they didn't really have a say in it, that I was just going to do what I wanted to do, and they did support me in that as much as they could. Like,
yeah, I'd say my experience is very similar to Susan's, and I've also lived abroad with my family, so I didn't have a situation where I really had to justify leaving. So I guess if you has something to do, then go ahead.
From a personal perspective, I don't really have the same experience. My mother was very, very enthusiastic about me going abroad, and same for other sort of people who are very close to me. But I think the way how you could argue to a person who might be a bit skeptical is that there's sort of several things. One is that going abroad really does offer an opportunity for you to have a really different experience that you might not have in Finland. How that could be very, very beneficial to you. To, of course, the fact that one is an autonomous person and is able to make their own decisions. That's the second point. And 3, even if you go abroad, you're still, because I think when people are worried about someone, about, when it comes to whether going abroad is a good decision for them, they're worried that it might somehow go wrong, or it might be a negative experience. But it's still very likely that you're going to be just fine if you go, and it's not really there's nothing really to worry about. Sorry, this is a bit wishy-washy, but maybe these 3 things are kind of something to keep in mind on this. Do we have any additional questions? There's one on doing an exchange year. Sort of whether it would be better, if one is a bit unsure, whether it would be better to maybe do an exchange year, perhaps during a bachelor's degree, and maybe then do a master's abroad, where of course a special panel when it comes to this, because we've all done our bachelor's or all of our studies so far abroad, so we didn't kind of go through that route of going to university in Finland and then experimenting. Yeah, does anyone have a comment on this?
I somewhat answer this. So I was lucky enough to kind of do these summer programs in both the UK and the US, and so kind of that short 2-3 week experience kind of solidified. Like I got kind of this micro experience of what it would be like to study abroad. So that kind of solidified that I did indeed want to study abroad. So if there are any experiences where you can go like study at a university during the summer or do like a program abroad, or like even go as an au pair and then maybe take some classes at a local university, that might kind of help with that situation.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
I think I could comment from the perspective that, as I said, I always want to go abroad, but I didn't really have the opportunity before. I really wanted to do high school exchange, but we couldn't afford it. So I kind of had to wait until the kind of university studies. And to be honest, when I arrived in Scotland, I actually really hated it. Like I was so unhappy. And it felt really hard because I always like saw myself through this kind of plan. I was like, I'm always like, that was my plan. I was like, I'm going to go study abroad. And then actually when I was there, I hated it. I did get over it in a bit and ended up loving it. But I think it's okay also, like if you do go abroad and then you go there and you hate it and you want to leave, like there are people who left and we actually, our supervisor at work with Juha, he went to Cambridge and then he left because he didn't like it. And I think you don't need to, I mean, if you feel better about kind of, studying in Finland, doing exchange and kind of trying it out, I think that's a good plan as well. But you can also just go abroad and try it out. And then if it doesn't work out, like it's really not the end of the world. Like you can still just change your course. Like by the time you go, you'll be so young anyways that it's really not like lost time or anything.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add one point to that, my plan when I was finishing high school was that I wanted to study abroad, but then if I didn't get into any of the universities that I would want to go to in the UK, then I'd just study in Finland. So I applied to universities in Finland as well. And then my backup plan was that I'd study here and then just do an exchange year to some other country. So that's definitely a really, really good option as well. And I think in Finland, there are super good opportunities for you to do exchange years through the universities here. So that's also a good plan.
I think let's tackle Pihla's question next about English proficiency. I suppose the panel and also including myself had some sort of background of studying in English or engaging with kind of living in an English-speaking country before going abroad. But you did, Susan. You didn't. Thanks. That's a good point. But how would you describe? And actually, well, then let's start from you, if you may. How would you describe the sort of the learning curve when it comes to just your level of English when you went to Aberdeen, and what kind of a baseline did the Finnish high school system provide you, and how did you sort of develop from there on?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd say that this is not like necessarily like a fair example in the sense that I've always been good at languages. So I was fluent in English before I went, even though I hadn't lived abroad. I just learned from TV and music and so on and so forth. But there were certain challenges when I went. For example, I did try and like read some books before I actually started studying in Aberdeen, and I found academic language really difficult because it was really difficult, for example, to get used to like references in the middle of text, for example, and obviously academic language is completely different. So it did take me some time to get used to that. And obviously when I went, like my vocabulary increased by a lot, especially in terms of like formal language and so on. I'd say, and my accent changed a bit as well, although it still changes on the daily. So there were definitely like still things that I had to learn when I went there. I suppose I could also comment from like the French perspective. Just so you know, in Sciences Po you can study in both in English and French. But I had studied French when I went to France, but I was definitely not fluent. But on my second term, I was already able to like do a course in French, for example. So I suppose like there I maybe had more of the kind of learning curve that could be possible in English for some people as well. But I did find if you really immerse yourself properly, it's still it's possible to develop really quickly as well. So I feel like even if you have a lower level of English to begin with, I wouldn't say it's impossible. You just have to put some more effort into it. But I would say that it's still possible to attain that. But that being said, like obviously I didn't have that many challenges when I was going in with English as I did with French.
Kia or Fanny, do you have anything to comment? I mean, I know that you, despite having had a background of either living abroad or both living abroad and maybe studying in English, did you experience some sort of a jump in your English level when going either to Brown or to Edinburgh? And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, for sure. At least one thing that was really helpful at Brown, they have this writing center. And they have this section is specifically for international students. So because I had done my high school completely in Finnish, so I hadn't written that many essays in English or like academic English, I guess. So that was really helpful. And even though I was like pretty good at speaking in English, I did notice myself get quite tired during my first month at Brown because I was just speaking in English and reading in English. So I wasn't doing any Finnish. So I feel like a lot of people might experience that like initial tiredness or fatigue. And then I think but then you realize that there are a lot of other international students who are also going through the same thing, and you're not the only one. Like there's another Finnish student at Brown, and he's from Hamina, and his English skills were pretty normal, basic, but then it got a lot better after the first semester because obviously you're just speaking in English all day, every day. So it's okay if you're not perfect at the beginning because like pretty quickly you'll develop the skills.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add on that, but I think one thing to remember is when you go to university, especially my experience with Edinburgh, is that it's mostly international students and they all have quite similar backgrounds to you, and everybody has a different accent. Everybody comes from a different place in different country, and there's so many different levels of English that people speak. That everyone's so used to, hearing you speak with whatever accent you speak with or struggling with words or whatever. I definitely wouldn't worry about your level of English. If you know how to speak it and understand it somehow, then once you immerse yourself in university life, it'll quickly start feeling normal. So yeah.
Thanks a million, Fanny. I think this is a good time for us to wrap up. I apologize for not having the opportunity to answer every single question in the chat, but we have those questions. So they're saved when the session is recorded, so we can come back to them. For example, I can come back to them over email. Thanks a million for the panelists. I'm going to give a 30-second pitch to the 43 people who are still in the chat about our mentorship program. So Project Access mentors Finnish high schoolers for free to apply to these top universities. The way we do it is that we connect a high schooler with a Finnish mentor from the university that you're applying to, or a very similar university, trying to find the best possible university subject match. And secondly, we're also arranging a boot camp at the beginning of September 3rd and 4th in Helsinki, in which 25 to 30 students will have an opportunity to workshop and listen to speeches and work on their application together with our mentors. And we're aiming to do that event in person. So I will be back to you via email on this as well. So we didn't really have that much time to discuss actually about the core work of Project Access, but I will be back on that via email. Thanks a million again to the panelists. This was a fantastic discussion, and I wish all the best to all the participants. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. It's sunny outside. All right, thanks a million.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.